Hi, welcome to Non-Perishable Goods Podcast. This is season 3. I'm here with our new co-host. I'm so excited, Alec.
Hello, I'm
How are you
excited.
doing today?
I'm beautiful, wonderful.
Yep.
How the words I could describe being happy and excited for this new venture with you and joining something that I've obviously the last 2 seasons have paid attention to and have
Oh,
subscribed and watch and obviously supported, not as affluently as I would like to, but I think that
you're a busy
this
man.
yeah, I'm very busy, but it's a good busy.
Yeah, and Alec, he just has so much culture, wisdom, real life experience. So I just know that you're gonna bring a lot to the podcast this season. So
Excited about, I think, that was one of the things we talked about, obviously pre-production, right? Is um, sometimes people just want to kind of thumb you down as just a coach, like you're just a coach.
right.
You don't have a lot of different things to offer, or I just believe in being a well-versed human being, right? Like I
Yeah,
love hip hop. I think music in its own right, for me at least, has transcended who I am as a coach. It's kind of the lifeblood of our culture in my program and the things that we do. What's always on the big boom box in the facility, things like that, and
sure.
just how you dress, how you walk, how you talk, the things that you do extracurricular outside of your career are very driven on that part of the culture. It's what I grew up on. It's the genre I would most reside with, and so
Yeah.
it's cool to talk about different things in the entertainment, music, lifestyle industry, because I think there's that a lot of it meshes together, if that
No.
makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And that's why, like, even the first show, you guys, our first episode of the season, I think you're gonna learn a lot more about Alec.
Yeah, I hope
And
so.
he was the one that came up with this topic of we're gonna discuss the documentary that was released in 2017 um with Jimmy Iovine
Mhm.
and Dr. Dre. And they are both, I mean, anybody who's a part of the music industry has heard these names and may not necessarily know their story, you know?
Yeah.
Because I didn't know. I saw this documentary, but I never pressed play on it, you know, and I should have because it's very inspiring. There's so many like undertones that you could take away from it. And so, I like you said, everybody knows that I love music. So we definitely I mean, there's going to be a lot of music, talking about music, business practices, personal skills that are needed and abilities to achieve their level of success. And so, yeah, they're just did I already say the Defiant Ones?
Yeah, you already said that part,
Yeah.
but I did want to piggyback off of kind of where and why it's important to maybe have this discussion even now in 2024 is that documentary came out on HBO literally right on the heels after, Straight Outta Compton came out. And, you know, I think that movie in its own right transcended media popularity of giving a story of probably one of the most infamous groups in hip hop culture and history of all time, right? And it set a
NWA.
yeah, and it set a whole entire coast, especially here in California. Being a California native, born and bred here in Northern California, I think that it's synonymous with kind of the way we live our lifestyle
Okay.
and kind of how we go about our business and the slang, the terminologies, the music that we listen to, the way we dress, the sometimes carefree nature, but we're always on our business tip. It's just, I think it's like being out here on the West Coast for a lot of reasons for me is why I've never left is it just, I don't see anywhere else that you get a mixture of all of it, right? You get a
Yeah.
mixture. slow pace, you get a mixture of fast pace, you have business, you have culture, you know, like
Go-getter mentality,
yeah, exactly.
like
And
ambition.
mhm, yeah, I
Period.
agree with all of that. Like and it gives you hope, right? A sense of hope. And I think all of us are drawn to hope, right? Like hopeful that we can, you know, whether you're in, you know, middle school to high school, then you get to college, you're hoping you get that good job, or you're hoping that you can set forth in an entrepreneurial way, just different things that I think that these types of documentaries provide, you know,
Yeah.
draw an extreme amount of inspiration from.
Yeah, because I mean, Dr. Dre and I mean everybody's pretty familiar with Dr. Dre's career, you know. He started off as a DJ for the Wrecking Crew,
Mhm,
right? Then he went to becoming an amazing engineer,
mhm,
then producer, and
mhm.
then executive and mogul. You know, that kind of all happened at the same time. Oh no, I guess aftermath and then um the beats, the whole beats.
I think it all kind of resonates with each other, though. You even see it in the movie, right? Like you see his transcendence of, you know, when his mom comes in and she's upset that he's only making $50 a gig, to where he's selling an idea of headphones for over $1 billion, you know. And so like within all of that is sandwiched is a lot of relationships, a lot of broken relationships, a lot of really good
Failures.
ships, a lot of failures in
Yeah.
between. Because, you know, when he first started Aftermath, you know, that Nas album and, you know, the De Facto Firm album kind of flopped. And it
Mhm.
was hard because we were still in kind of entrenched in that East Coast, West Coast beef, where he was trying to cross over the music to not being just centrically West Coast based, and, you know, giving his beats to others. And then, you know, the finding of Eminem. And then, you know, in that family tree, it's like
Ooh.
you find the next best thing in Eminem is 50 Cent. And then just with that kind of power trio led by one guy's vision of being an entrepreneurial businessman in Jimmy Iovine, I think that there's a lot of linear, you know,
Yeah.
just things that you can find in this, you know, in within the documentary. And it's a 4-piece documentary that, you know, you could either binge it or you could basically spend 5 to 6 and finish it for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
I binged it. I did it all in
yeah,
one night.
I
It was that interesting because even with Jimmy Iovine, like his upbringing, like there, it was similar to Dr. Dre's, but he was in New York, you
yeah,
know, the other
yeah,
coast, and he, you know, from Brooklyn, New York, he, you know, came up with a blue collar, hardworking family. But he, like it, you know, his path was being an engineer, producer, executive as well. And so they had a lot of similarities, even in their childhood, which I thought was,
don't you think in a way like those similarities obviously spark an opportunity to have, you know, one, a good relationship, but two, an understanding in business, right? Like, and we talked about that pre-production, even just like with my academy and the merger. Like you have to have similarities, and
yeah,
those a lot of ways have to be compounded with foundational like moral goals, you know what I mean?
how you're
And
raised, your foundation. I think
yeah,
that's even more important because I mean, Jimmy Iovine is Italian, you know, Dr. Dre's Black African American, like totally different, like culturally, but I think they had the same struggles and the same love. Like he had Ivine and Dre both had very loving mothers.
yeah,
And I think love
and
helps
mhm,
in that support, you know.
mhm.
It definitely develops you. Um so they it was just it they just have differences, but they had the similarities to also are the same goals of just wanting to have more and to be better.
Yeah,
And
and you got that from Jimmy in like the first part, right? Like just who he's worked with. That was the one thing that, like I told you a couple weeks ago when we first started talking about the topic was it's just like he's worked with so many just legends.
Legends.
And for me,
Springsteen, Tom
yeah,
Petty, John Lennon.
yeah, and U2,
Oh, right.
Springsteen,
Yep.
he's had his hand in heavy pop, rock, hip hop, and pretty much anybody he's ever had underneath his labels has, reached superstardom,
Hmm.
right? To a point almost where it's like scary. It's like he's a manager. He's kind of like the Phil Jackson of music, right? He's just had
Yeah.
on his roster through and through.
But he kind of just, to me, what I got from it was that he fell into these positions by just having, by showing up and the opportunity presenting itself,
Yeah.
and like, and just putting himself out there because I think it was one Easter they called him and he didn't want, he was about to go to like a family Easter dinner or something, but they called him and were like, we need you to come in. And he was like, okay, I'll be there. So he always, to me, in his situation, he kind of just fell into these positions by being in alignment and taking advantage of these opportunities.
Or you could be on the flip side of that, right? And say that, he probably practices a mantra that I always say, your best ability in this world is ultimately your availability.
Hmm.
So being in a
Yeah.
with being available to what may be where he probably thinks of work as not work. He just thinks of it as this is a time I get to go and do my thing.
Hmm.
And usually transcends more than motivation. That becomes a ritual or a discipline for most, that
Hmm.
do have success. And I think that that's what I pretty much drew from it was is like, okay, if I love baseball the way I do, I don't look at going to the ballpark or going to my facility as work. Like
Right.
it's what I'm available to do, and I'm going to do the best I can possibly do every time I show up. And that's how I took it.
Right. And he wasn't very good at what he
Oh, he
was
was
doing.
terrible. He
Yeah,
was
that's he got
terrible.
fired.
Yeah, he got fired. I think it was like talent management at first, right? Like more of like an A&R, is what I got from just the book that he has as well. Like, more of an A&R for certain like punk rock bands, grunge, more underground back then. And that's also, a lot of lineage to the hip hop community as well as, hip hop very much started parties, boroughs, underground, just like punk rock and things of that nature. So I think it kind of transcended, and it's why I felt like he probably fell in love with hip hop or Dr. Dre and understanding kind of his upbringing because he was in the midst of all of those punk bands and the Stevie Nickses of the world and people that were very non-mainstream at the time, and a lot of people
Yes.
shun the music, and I feel like that's where we draw our similarities or our now I don't even like to say comparisons, but like just similarities, right? Like these are very similar um
Yeah.
attributes that Dr. Dre and others are now providing this guy who's kind of already lived through it before in a former life, really.
Yeah. Because they were both definitely seeking authenticity in,
Yeah,
in their artists. And
yeah.
I think a lot of people, like the music industry has changed over the decades, but they always were grounded in that realness, that authenticity for sure,
Hmm.
you
You
know?
know,
So
it's really crazy to see like, and you go into more and more of the documentary and you'll start to really see who has benefited. Sorry, the dog is drinking his water. He's a
funny.
nut. He's trying to annoy me. But
Uh-oh.
you start to see the authenticity with people like Snoop Dogg per se, right? Like and people that Ice Cube and just obviously how real, if you go back and I did this and this is just who I am though, so the audience can understand. Like when Straight Outta Compton came out, I went back and obviously played all of the music and kind of rekindled, what even got me started. And like my first real album for all of them was not the first NWA album, obviously, but it was more Ice Cube's Predator album. And so like I remember my uncle always playing that album and just, you know, kind of rekindling or realizing, you know, what drew me into Ice Cube. It wasn't the Friday stuff. For most people, it is. You know, most people, it's the movies being synonymous with the music, you know, kind of bridging all of those things together. But again, like I said, I'm more transcendent upon, you know, the actual artist and what they've done. And what you get from them and who brings out the best in them. And I think that's what's really cool about that whole documentary is seeing just how great these guys are together.
Yeah, because that was one thing they both had. They knew how to bring out the best in others. And that's important. That's
Mm-hmm.
important to have those kind of people around in your circle. And the one thing I did take away from the Dre story with NWA is that everybody on that team played their part because they weren't necessarily
Yeah.
writers.
Oh
They
yeah.
weren't they weren't
Well, you
rappers.
know, go
He
back,
wasn't a
right?
rapper.
But you go back to it and it's like Cube is the writer, right? Like Cube
Yeah.
and
And
Ren.
Doc
I
and
thought
DOC.
DOC for sure. DOC had a lot of, you know, I'd love to hear more about his story. You know, like you get a glimpse of it, but I feel like DOC and Ice Cube were kind of the two upper echelon writers within that group. And he was a de facto member of NWA. So we have to remember that part too. But he did write a hefty amount of songs, lyrics, and things for those guys. And even still to this day, he's still writing, you know, and so like that's where I guess that word, like you said, the authenticity of these people playing their part. And that's a hard thing to do because that's a cultural stigmatism that we as, you know, a Black or an African American culture really do struggle with, right? So like
You want to
we
be the
can even,
top dog. Yeah, you want to
yeah,
always be
and it's hard to collaborate, right? Like it's almost that old saying, like our grandparents were like, "Don't be crabs in a barrel," you know, don't keep snipping at somebody just because they're rising to the top. And um, when money's involved, when a lot of money's involved, I mean, we've seen the downfall of dynasties and record labels and even sports in everything. I mean, like
yeah.
I end up having a conversation and discussion about Kanye at some point, you know, and Jay-Z and all of that, because that's something unmindfully I've studied because I
Yeah.
enjoy and I enjoyed their stories, you know, as far as they came up and what they've done. And that's why I wanted you to at least see it, you know, for yourself, was to see kind of the meteoric rise of certain failures turned into successes and then certain things that never even came to fruition. Like I love that they spent about 20-25 minutes on the album Detox, you know,
Right.
where every
Right.
single that they did,
Think
everybody
about
was great.
Yeah, and think about how long fans were waiting for Detox. Like it was always like mentioned, like, oh, it's gonna come then, here, it's gonna come then. It never came
Well,
because
it's the
he,
greatest album never told, right? Or
yeah,
never, you know, it's the one allure that most hip hop, you know, I would just say hip hop fans in general, you know, I want to lump them all together on this one, but I think if he were to sit here and have a shock drop on a Friday with it, it would blow up, you know, because people are still waiting for it.
yeah,
You know, I think
yeah.
Snoop came out last week and said that they've been working for 8 months now on a new
True.
album. So
But Dre was a guy of feeling. Like everything that I got from him, he went with his gut, and he just kept alluding to the fact that if he doesn't feel something, he doesn't see the purpose of putting it out. And so that's kind of the detox. Like he just stopped feeling it, and he just went into other directions.
I think a lot of really transcendent, especially hip hop artists, have gotten to, right? Like, and I feel it's a sign of obviously maturity in emotional growth, right? Like where you're not just putting out a bunch of 16s or an EP or a mixtape or just anything to try to stay relevant, because the music business is completely different than what it was when we were coming up, right? Like I remember camping out for a Wu-Tang double CD in 1997 at Virgin and Arden, you
Yeah.
know, like that will never happen again. Like my son will never
Yeah, I know. That was exciting times.
play it forward to get your favorite song off of, 103 or 102, So
Yeah,
I just felt like I think we value music in a certain way. And this can even go into another part of it too, like where we can talk about, because me and my boys, like, I have two really good friends that of, Cameron and Leo,
oh
that
yeah,
went to Laguna
oh
with you, and that's kind of,
yeah,
those are my hip hop boys. We talk daily, about culture and music and entertainment. It's kind of like my reprieve from the sports world, being able to talk about shoe culture and hip hop and entertainment and things like that. And we're really entrenched on the fact that, like, should we have gate kept certain things within the hip hop realm of the world, because the way music is now, I feel like I understand where Dr. Dre's coming from, where if he doesn't feel it, like, why would I put it out? Especially going up against somebody who it felt like they spent maybe 6 hours in a studio and made an album. And that album
yeah.
now at number one just because they have a TikTok to it, that kind of thing. And
And
so,
your image and your brand, like everything else but the music, like matters now, it seems like in the
yeah.
industry, you know?
Did you notice, like, the episode 4, when he was talking about the beats thing, right? And how it came about. And they first presented him with a shoe. So
Right.
that it's all very transcendent. Like even on Sunday, Jay-Z's and his old pair of S. Dot Reeboks, right? Like
You
I
saw
remember
that? That was
big pair,
crazy.
right? And so, like, I remember the hype leading up to it. Your first pair you bought, you had a mixtape with it, which was the
Mhm.
or the prelude, or it want to say just the intro, right? It was more of a prelude to the Black album. So he puts this, 22 song mixtape out that
Mhm.
a lot of people don't know. Like, and that was like he had this was the first time you really heard Jay-Z over, Joe Budden's beats, B2K, like pretty
Oh, wow.
transcendent
Do you
people
remember
during.
the names? Do you remember the names of those mixtapes?
Oh man, I would have to go back and look.
Okay.
That mixtape was a part of your shoe purchase.
Mhm.
So like, you
But
could
that
get
just
it.
shows you how the marketing and the business are
Mhm.
really hand in hand, and they were great marketers. Iovine was great at marketing.
Yeah, and he knew that though. I think that that's one of the geniuses that you get from watching the 4-part series is this dude was cooped up in his bathroom, right? On Easter Sunday where everybody's at his house for Easter dinner, and he's on the phone with executives trying to get certain things pushed through,
Mhm.
and literally eating his meal inside the bathroom, like trying not to be disturbed because he's handling business. And again, there, you talk about, hey, what's your best ability in this world, and gift is your availability, the ability to show up and handle the hard, right? Handle the
Yeah.
hard, and not. I can guarantee you, he's not a guy that walks into a room, even with their meeting, what they had with Apple and the Beats, right? When they kind of towards the end of the documentary, you see it. He attacks certain points where a lot of times, and we've all been in those meetings before, where you're kind of hesitant to say something, or you don't want to necessarily raise your hand and speak your truths. Like he's spearheading all of the truths that a lot
Mhm.
of people sitting in that room have, or questions or concerns or probabilities.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. He's pretty amazing.
That's my question to you is like, what did he do for you? Like, just his story, like in his background and what he did. Like, how did that make you feel? Like, did you feel more inspired to
Yeah,
continue
yes.
to?
I was like, I could go on forever. No, he definitely inspired me. I think that just showing that having work ethic, having an excellent work ethic, not that you have to be good, but you need to just show up and you
Mhm.
need to just continue to show up and be persistent. Really don't take no for an answer in a lot of situations. It may not be your time at that moment, but just keep pushing, you
But
know?
also have your ability to say no, right? Like that is a skill in its own right. Like
This
having
is
the
true.
ability to say no to something that could be detrimental to an artist or an opinion or a vision. Like, I think the whole social media era has brought upon de facto philosophers, right? Like, and a lot of people, like they say, don't take advice from somebody beneath you or somebody that hasn't really been where you're trying to
But
go.
right.
But I always have this thing, like, there's something in someone else's life that has happened to them that didn't happen to me, that I can hopefully draw, one, inspiration, or two, knowledge from, so I don't take that loss. I think that's like one of the more transcendent things that I got from Jimmy as a coach, right? Like,
Yeah.
he just
His
has,
mentor. And
yeah,
I think it's important to have mentors, like
yeah,
people that have
yep,
been there that are doing it. Because that's something I haven't had in life, really.
mhm,
I always wanted one because I just know that it's helpful because people do share knowledge with you and you can grow and at faster rates, you don't have to do everything on your own and figure everything out on your own. So I think it's because he had David Geffen, I believe.
yeah,
And I just
yeah.
think mentorship is so
Well,
important.
and it's like this, like, so you have probably the world's biggest record label ever in Jiffin Records, right? And that's your not only mentor, but your best friend, right? Somebody who you throw every single idea off of, basically, at your fingertips.
Yeah.
And even though you say you want one, I would challenge you to think back to who you've had or run in with your life, and where you maybe not have seized that opportunity to make them, your
That's true
mentor, or
too.
make them a vital part of how you construct your business or construct your career, and give you flight for that. Because that's one thing, like, I know that a lot of people don't realize is like, it's very easy to throw a bunch of names out there, right? Especially in my arena,
Oh
because I have
yeah.
and people that I know who have played at the highest precipice of sport.
Hmm.
And I don't like to throw those names out just to throw them out. Like, these are people I actually consult with. These are people I talk to on a consistent basis, because it's like, I don't want to make a mistake. And even if I do make a mistake, like, I can err on the side of caution of that mistake and still learn from that mistake, but not be so detrimental or so far down the hole
Hmm.
that, like, hurts my business, or it hurts this team in particular, or things like that. So I would say, like, for me, I've probably been lucky enough to have about 5 or 6,
That's
and three
great.
that I consistently talk to on a daily basis, you
Yeah.
know, that can give me that mentor.
And I feel like baseball, you guys have that camaraderie though, to where
Hmm.
you want to help each other. Like it's different. Like sports is very important to, I think, the youth's upbringing.
Hmm.
It's just there's a lot of great I don't know what's the word, factors or things that
Well,
will help them
yeah,
develop.
I think it's exactly what you just said, right? But let's take it a step further and double back on what you have already alluded to, is that Dr. Dre was a part of a team, and that team played their role, right? So, like, all these guys had to have some form of upbringing within sports, which we know now to be very true, especially with Snoop and Ice Cube and other guys like that did play basketball or football and things like that, right? And there's movies that depict that, like the movie The Wood always depicts, in my opinion, like, my biggest takeaway in The Wood is like, you had a kid from North Carolina coming in to a school in Inglewood, and he meets two brothers that only played basketball, had really never messed with baseball. So, like, that movie right off the cusp had got me entrenched. Like, I'm glued
Mhm.
to the TV the rest of the 2 hours that I'm in the movie theater, or if I'm watching it at the house, things like that. And, like, that's what sports does do, because I
Yeah.
think where we're at now, like, in going back on the social media aspect, I think it's become such a self-centered and selfish way that we sometimes lead our lives, right?
Yeah, the
And
individual, the influencer.
hmm and the influencer term, right, is really just look at me, right? Like, look at me, look at me, look what I do.
Yeah.
I'm perfection, and whoever's eyes may be drawn to it, but we've all scrolled reels, we've all scrolled TikToks to kind
Yeah.
of get a glimpse of somebody
It's
else's
we're
life.
just Yeah, we're definitely going into a more like self-centered
Hmm.
era. Like everything's about self-care, self this, self-made, self. But we have to get away from that ego. of self. But I mean, it's good to have a balance of, confidence and whatever, but we do need to rely on, well, not rely, but we need to know that having a team is very helpful in this life. Having a friend, having
favorite thing that you just said, just
what?
hit the nail on the head, and I'm glad you did. You hit the nail on the head. Was the ego part of, and because that was like the biggest takeaway I had in that 4-part series was he had 20 artists that transcended music for the last 40 plus years, right? And their one quote that they have for Jimmy is that he always says the ego is not the amigo.
Oh,
And
wow.
I find that to be in a more of a, especially the music industry, because you know groups break up all the time.
And
right?
NWA was at the top of the charts, and they
Mhm.
broke up when they were number one
Yeah. And
because of ego.
you hear about the ego not being the amigo, right? And you think about all these guys and how he's changed their mindset of how to perform or how to get the best album out of all of these guys. And I think it's an amazing job, right? Like that's just like, if you were a coach, you're probably 10-time world champions, because of this one particular guy. And the one quote that he's had that has stuck with everybody was that quote, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that he is very transcendent upon their culture within the Interscope family, the Jeffen family, who he's been involved with, his mentorship towards others. And like, it's kind of like that each one to teach one mentality.
Yes. Iron sharpens iron.
But we're going to get filthy rich while doing it, because you're going to have to us, because he understood. And I think this is one of the things that when we don't give flowers to others is like, he understood his value. So from a selfish standpoint, hell yeah, he understood who he was and what
Mm-hmm.
what their initial movement was about. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's an opinion, but that's what I took, from all of it is like, this dude has really transcended himself into a mogul and made another man a mogul to see past his music, right? And defy certain odds and become, the culture's first billion-dollar man.
Yeah, because they said that or I guess he said that music was a young man's game.
Yeah.
So I kind of just think he knew, the studio, being in the studio hours and hours at a time was, it's over with. Like, it's time to pivot. And it's okay to pivot. It's okay to pivot in life. That's what I took from it.
Athletic world, right? Is, you can take guys like, I'm very interested this year to see how Tom Brady does as an analyst. I think we Tony Romo call a Super Bowl, and he gets a lot of hate on Twitter or X now, whatever you want to call it. I still call it Twitter because it's Twitter for me. Yeah. But he gets a lot of hate because he gets excited, right? I had read an article that CBS wanted him to kind of dumb down his excitement. And it's like, I actually enjoy hearing him and guys like John Smoltz or Harold Reynolds call games, because they give me as a former athlete and as a coach right now in that perspective, a lot of insight as to what he's reading right there, as if he was in the game. And I want that perspective. And so like, that's why I really like hearing documentaries and seeing what goes into the actual craft of these individuals to make them great. I think that's why Kobe is so transcendent upon us right now, even past his death, where I don't think we'll ever forget about that guy, because he had so many different ways of attack, right? Yeah. Like how he attacked game planning, how he attacked showing up to the arena just to get going. Yeah. And what his real drive was, right? And so we as human beings are always looking for inspiration. That I know that I've learned in 43 years is we're all fighting for inspiration.
If you're ambitious, and I think a lot of people who will be focused on this podcast, they're ambitious people. So, but there are people out here in this world that just aren't really they don't they're not into that self-improvement or continual self-improvement that I think is so necessary if you are trying to achieve goals.
Yeah, I think a
If you
lot of
want
people.
success, if you want success.
Yeah, but you got to remember this quote too: "A goal is a dream with a deadline." Right? Like, so there's a lot of dreamers in the world. There's just not a lot of workers in the world. You know, people that are working to achieve a specific goal. That's something that I talk to my kids about constantly. You know, I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's, you
What a
know, making sure
even
you do that every day. Like that can be a goal. Like, you don't want to forget your belt or your socks or a piece or an article of your equipment. Like, those are things that I feel like are kind of lost in the fundamental shift that we're in right now, the kind of the paradigm we're in, because I believe in the attention to details. So like when I'm watching these two individuals on camera being interviewed, hearing how detailed oriented they are about their process, not the result, but the process of how Dre makes an album, the
hard work.
process of how he does his thing. It's
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah, no.
master class in production. It's a master class in team leading, leadership, mentorship, entrepreneurship. You know, it's just a master class, and I think that's for me is
Yeah.
what documentary
Yeah, like
more.
if you yeah, if you want it, you have to go and get it. And that's what I really took away is like if I want this, I need to
And look,
do everything to get it.
reached out. You reached out, and and it's funny because like I don't heart a lot of things on Instagram as far as stories, but like I watch your stories every day, you know,
Oh.
and for me, you keep me abreast in a float on a lot of topics that I may not go and scroll for,
Mhm.
right? Algorithms are obviously going to be different. Mine is like a lot of sports and a lot of funny memes time. So it's like when I go to see your stuff, it's like, okay, you know, I didn't know Victoria Monet was from SAC. I should, because, you know, like I've known Phil from, you know, the Jabberwockies since he was little. You know, they all
Okay.
went to school. So like I
You
have
went
a
to
very,
Sheldon?
no, he was Florin. He was a Florin kid.
Oh, okay, 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 okay. You're right, you're right.
You know, so like all of those guys are very transcendent with me because one of my closest friends in high school is Joseph Epperson, who is now a big time producer and it does a lot of work with Guapole
Oh,
and
nice.
all her albums. You know, he's responsible for a lot of that. But his mother, Miss Meeks, God rest her soul, probably one of the sweetest ladies I've ever met, was their dance instructor at Florin.
Oh, okay.
Like I just, it's funny to see greatness in 2024 that I saw in 1996, in
It's a long
1997.
road. That's the other thing.
So
It's
it's
a
like,
long
you know,
road.
you gravitate to those types of things, you know, the stereotypes with John and Ray and those guys and Jeremy and what they've done with Bruno Mars, with Justin Bieber, and like their sound is now out. And I remember when they were on an MTV show, kind of like Making the Band, you know, like where they performed on a weekly basis and had to be voted on, and they finished in second, you know, in the championship round, but they took a leap of faith and left Sacramento, California and moved to LA. So I remember
Yeah.
the
But
early,
but all that was essential to their, elevation.
so kind of around these people, like these types of people, you know, whether they're your close friends or whether they're acquaintances or whether a lot of these people are more in the middle. Like we all still kind of talk, we all see each other online, we all have a mutual respect, and I'm a big believer in I support you to your
Mhm.
full potential. Like even with, you know, my one of my closest friends in the world, you know, I will still pay him full clip for my haircut. I don't want to count. Like this is who you are. This is what you've done to provide a service for the world. Like I'm gonna pay you what you are worth, you know. And
Mhm.
I that's another piece of the documentary that makes you really think twice about what you were doing. You know, even in my pivot with my business, you know, it's like, okay, I am worth more than what I'm charging right now, but I have a
Mhm.
hard time figuring out what is that denomination? What's
Mhm.
that number? Because everybody has a number, but I don't want to seclude myself or isolate myself on an island of overpricing or even undervaluing, which I've done for 12, 13 years, of undervaluing my abilities as a coach and what my program may provide. And there are a lot of people out there that take advantage of that part of it. So like, I understand where Andre 3000 and where Dre and where Jay-Z aren't going to put out quality, effective music. They could put out anything they want and it'll sell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Put out a flute album and it goes to the top of the charts. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to sell, but is it meaningful? You know,
Right.
does it mean anything to the actual artist? And I feel like we as consumers of art forget that it is an art.
Mm-hmm.
It's for our consumption in a way, but you got to remember that this is an artist, and I think that that's been uniquely pressed upon just a little bit about myself, so people know, is like, I have two sons, you know, in their early 20s now. I'm a young father, which is, I feel, phenomenal, because like, I have the best relationship with both kids. Is that
Yes, it's
I've got
beautiful.
a moon child and I've got a son child. You know, my moon child's the artist who's very misunderstood and quiet and shy and doesn't like his art to be displayed all the time, but he's phenomenal at it. And then I have a son child who shines in athletic competition and is a student athlete at an NC2A level and does all, you know, all the things that his dad did. And he's very boisterous and personable and outgoing. So it's like, I have a healthy mix of the two. So I understand both sides, the artistry
Mhm.
side, and then, you know, the getting paid side, I guess you could say, you know.
Yeah, it's all about finding that balance, over time,
Over time, yeah.
and learning from it, learning from all these situations and making adjustments to protect yourself in
Hmm.
business, but also you're still going to do this because it's your passion and it's your love.
Hmm. I,
So,
Kanye keeps putting out music, right? Like, it's his passion, and
yeah,
we
but he's
passion, and that,
also a mogul.
yeah. And I think that he is such a defiant spirit, right? Like, people don't talk about that enough, where has such a high spirit. And I think a lot of stuff happened when his mom died, and everybody handles trauma and loss differently.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't necessarily think he was bred to be the mogul like Jay-Z had alluded to, and that's a whole nother topic we could even have a show
I
on.
know.
It's
Yeah.
affecting every single Jay-Z album, to seeing the prophecy that he gave us in '95 to now, and how that has transpired into
But it was
making.
always in him. It was always, I think every individual, it's in you. Sometimes you're able to recognize it. Other times, other people have to point it out in you for you to recognize it, or
Mhm.
you know what I mean? So it's just a process. Like life is a journey. I know that's cliche, but it really is. And everything that we go through is a stepping stone to something else, and to get you to your destiny of
Yeah.
whatever we're here for, because we're all individuals that bring a unique experience to this world that we're supposed to share with this world our purpose, and
Mhm. Yeah, and
that
I'm
that
a
whole
firm believer that, like, if you put yourself in a good position to win, um, and you're just a little bit more reflective on who's around, your surroundings,
it's
I
so
think,
important.
you know, that might be something that somebody hears just right now, is that I would just be more mindful of who you have around you, and some of the habits and rituals that they bestow that are positive, as opposed to looking for something more judgmental and being negative. Because like, I hate being a negative person. Like, it literally, I've noticed as I've gotten older, like, negativity just, it
It
bogs
weighs
me
you
down.
down. Yeah, it weighs you down, and people will either pull you down or push you out and pull you up if you
Mhm.
need a little bit of help getting up. But your net worth.
Mhm.
Your network is your net worth and all that kind of stuff. But
And
um,
that's a fact. I can't stress that enough. That
yeah.
factual statement is definitely what I pulled from, the documentary and the things that I saw. One other thing that I did notice was both guys striving for perfectionism. Like,
Mhm.
they're perfectionists
Mhm.
in
That
every.
excellence. And they were confident and they knew what they had. They actually recognized what they had. And that's why Jimmy Iovine, he got fired from a lot of jobs because he wasn't good in some areas, but he also didn't have humility. So he learned how to be humble through the times he's gotten fired for, being overzealous or telling people what it is or how to do it. And it's just it's part of life.
It is. It's a big part of life.
You know?
That's why I feel
So
like
humility, it's
that
huge.
they transcend who we are, right? Like music, lifestyle, entertainment, culture, sports, they all are that equal as culture, right? Like that's the culture. And we're living in those times right now. Like hip hop is heavily influenced sport all over the world.
Oh
And
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it's very transcendent because like that's another reason why I wanted to do this with you was to kind of bring to light, like the days of playing a lot of country music at games and old 70s rock, which you still get in certain areas of the
But you're gonna
country.
hear that hip hop. You're gonna hear that
Yeah,
50
but
Cent.
like at the 2017 World Baseball Classic in LA, and Drake had just dropped his album,
Oh,
and they spun the whole album during batting practice, and it's like that's crazy. Like when would you have, as growing up, the Sacramento kid, we went to a lot of A's games and even Giants games, and you didn't
mm,
hear that, the walk up song, the lead up
mm,
stuff, like how they do the Jumbotron intros, like, all the highlights
yeah,
that like I even create those for my kid, like, and they have transcendent songs that for me are going to be timeless because it's our culture, right? It's the culture, we were raised with was really good old school soul music leading into hip hop. So like we have a very wide variety of tastes of
yeah.
music and culture. And I just think like those two have done such a phenomenal job synonymously together.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah. I mean, you get a $3 billion check at the end of your life. You did all right.
yeah,
You
it,
and you have a university at
yeah,
USC named after you, a school of engineering, I believe,
yeah,
and production, or it's just in business is also
media,
a part of
all
the
media,
curriculum.
yeah.
Yeah.
And now you have kids graduating, with your ribbon and the things that you've done, and considering that neither one had attended secondary education at the
Yeah.
highest level
Yeah.
in
It's work ethic.
this
Period.
university in the world. Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty.
Sorry. I know I'm
it,
all excited. I'm like, whoo.
there's so many things to unpack in a 4 hour, a 4.5 hour documentary. There's a lot to unpack, and
Yeah.
just a different things.
Yeah, I took notes. I always take notes off
Yeah.
of a lot of stuff, but just some real key points I think I want to share as we wrap this up
Hmm.
is to, just to be focused, never give up. You just have to keep pushing. You might be like Dre and you are in tune with your gut. So listen to your intuition, your gut. Take risks, always work towards what you want and never stop. uh
I agree.
push push boundaries on everything.
Hmm.
Have the same team. Oh, it is important. It's nice to have the same team around. Like if you can come up with a team that you guys all work together with, it's good to work with those same people, but sometimes you have to make cuts because there's weak links. But having a cohesive group is great because I know Jimmy Iovine kept with a lot of his same team around as he's gone through the different
Having
pivots.
core staff is super essential to any type of business, period. In my business, I just talked to my staff about this last week. It's very transcendent on why I've been doing it for 15 years, is because I've had phenomenal people by
Yeah,
my
that's
side.
awesome. Yeah,
And
we
even
always.
one that left negatively, by, kind of thing. But overall, the mainstays, the people that mattered, stayed and are still a part of it. And it's even kind of cool now sitting here 15 years later and seeing my coaching tree continue to grow and now spawn out. And,
Wow.
one of the things that is super been, I would say, just super productive, but like lucrative It's not a monetary thing. It's just been lucrative for mind, body, and spirit, right?
Yeah.
Like
Intrinsically rewarding.
Yeah, I know that I have people I trust
Oof,
that if
so
I'm on get done and they have no problem executing the plan. And I'm forever grateful for that. Like that, I think that that's also a mark of being a very transcendent leader, right? And not being a dictator and being more of a player's coach, a staff's guy, understanding like, I don't want to be the spearhead. Like I know I'm the figurehead. I don't want to be only driving force that's driving this brand or of baseball or culture.
Yeah, and great leaders serve their people.
Mm-hmm.
And great leadership is also delegating, being able to delegate to the right people,
Definitely. And delegation is a big thing that I think, and that's another topic. We have so many topics we can go over because in today's kind of get rich or die trying schemes of influencer content and different things of that nature, I think a lot gets lost in being subservient to not just God, but to others. And I just feel like
people pleasing.
Yeah. I hate that word because I think like the undertone of people pleasing is just more like you're not being authentic. Like I feel like there's a way to be authentic, and like I do people please because of what I do,
Right. It's just that's a natural thing.
Yeah, I'm not knocking what you're saying. I'm just saying like I hate that word or that phrase for a lot of reasons because I am pleasing the people with knowledge, with wisdom, with know-how, with bringing something out of their child that they may not have been able to bring out. And I feel like if you're cohesively on the same page with those that are in your congregation or conglomerate or membership or whatever you want to label it, the fruits of those labors are so much more fruitful. And that is kind of people pleasing. I just think people pleasing has such a negative connotation to it because it can be very skewed negative.
It is a negative. Yeah. People pleasing is definitely a negative term.
Yeah.
So,
but when
I agree with what you're saying though. Yeah. Like if it's naturally in you to take care of those around you, that's what a king does. That's the literal definition of a king, is to take care of the ones around you. I don't see that as people pleasing. Like people pleasing to me is maybe more like just doing too much that's not necessary for the wrong intentions. It all comes back to intentions.
Yeah, I get it. Because there's ill will or malice intent with that, right?
Yeah, like you give to receive, or
or you give because you want to hold something against someone else.
Like yes, it's the intention. It's definitely the intention. And then so then okay, real quick. Use of adversity to push you, because like there's a lot of negative things that's going to happen to our lives, but we have to use that as knowing that it's just like redirecting us onto the path that we're destined for, like the spiritual level, or just you have to learn a little bit more before you can proceed. So adversity, we have to look at that, or negative things that happen to us, that it's an opportunity to overcome or change or get better or grow from. Both put 100%. Oh yeah, just put 100% into everything. And every step of your life leads you to your destiny. Everything we do has a purpose.
Which is already written, by the way.
You said what? What'd you say?
For my spiritual folks, which is already written, by the way, by him. But yeah, I think that here's a cool thing that I learned during the COVID era, right, in 2020, which was a very isolated era for someone who's very centric around others all the time, and where I spent a lot of time alone, right? And I got that part of it was, how fruitful can I be within my own pod? Am I doing enough just in my own space in order to feel worthy enough to give it to others in their space or our collaborative space? And so I wholeheartedly agree with all of your notes, like, and I know that is not usually the definition of a podcast, because we're not going to be yelling and screaming at each other or anything crazy like that, like Stephen A.
Not yet. We'll see how some of these other shows go.
Yeah, I don't think it'll ever get to that point because it's like I think we both have a level-headedness of rationale and seeing where each other are coming from in
And
our
know how to
different.
articulate
Yeah,
our stance, you know?
yeah, for sure. And again, I think one of the things that's missing in adulthood nowadays is just agreeing to disagree without a bunch of discernment, right? Without a bunch of chaos and drama. Like I don't have to agree with everything that you do. I don't have to agree with how you put your shoes on or what shoe you're gonna wear. Like if that's what you want to do, that's what you're gonna do. And I think maybe another topic that we can maybe put on the ledger is, the whole body movement part, right? Like this, what we're seeing in the world today, the enhancements, the de-enhancements, embracing who you are, things like that. And I've always been taught like embrace who you are. You have a great smile, smile. Moms always say that. My dad's always just like, use your words. That's a
Mm.
famous Al Smith line. It's just like, and I take that in such a broader spectrum than most people would. Most people are just going to be like, are you saying use your words for a meal? Or I'm like, no, use your words. You're smart, you're articulate, you understand, you're well read, you're well versed, you have college degrees and education. Like use your words. Use your words as power to get where you want to go. And I think both of
Oh, that's big. Like speaking into existence. That kind of
them.
goes with this show. Like,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people say manifest, but you like the way God created this earth was by speaking. Like he
Hmm.
spoke the heavens and he spoke there, let there be light. And so there's a lot of power in speaking what you want and writing it down.
Yeah. And I'm big on both.
Yeah.
Very big. I
Yeah.
mean,
That's in a
endless.
lot of people's stories.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's what I've been blessed with overall for the audience to kind of get to know is like I feel like I've taken ownership of those multiple things, like those multitude of things, and I've been able to curate and carve out success the way I think it should be. Now, could it be bigger? Hell yeah, it could be bigger. Could I be more lucrative? Yeah, sure. But like I'm very happy and content where I'm at right now. There's been a lot of ups and downs over the last, I would say, 3.5 years since COVID hit, which I think that the impact, and that's another show, right? Like we just have all these topics
Yeah. We just
in
skipped
cover.
past the whole COVID recovery. I feel like life was just like, okay, COVID's over, go outside, everybody get to it. But a lot of
Yeah,
people are
there's
still
so,
dealing with it.
there's so much to unpack on that.
We're gonna do that show.
Yeah, because I deal with it on the ground level since,
With kids, yeah.
since it what I see now as opposed to what I saw 10 years ago, you know,
Mm.
it's heavy and it weighs on your heart. And there becomes a lot of sleepless nights because there's a lot of people out there right now. And I guess this is my like ending to what our show's been about today is there's just a lot of people that don't take that extra step to go fulfill maybe their prophecies or their destinies and the things that they probably should be doing. But let me be this beacon of hope and say that put yourself around the right people. You know, they may not agree with everything you're doing because you definitely don't want a bunch of yes people in your life ever. You want challenges and you want those challenges to be fulfilling in a way that it challenges you to think about your movement and how you're dealing with emotional maturity, situational pieces, right? And so, like, but don't let one or two or even three setbacks set you back to the point of quitting, right? And that's what I got from the documentary
Yes,
is,
keep going.
these dudes really did transcend the music industry and the entertainment industry in its own right. Like they had a big think about this, right? Everybody was concerned about record sales for umpteenth years, right? It's how everything has been quantified as success in the music industry. These two dudes single handedly went to the source, which was now the internet, because of the piracy of Napster and things like that, and said, bump that. Make that device that you have on your phone, which is your phone, and make it a recording device to where we can stream our music onto it. So that 1099 now, which was it started at 999, I want to say almost 10 years ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It's only gone up $1. in a market where you would probably expect that thing to be like how Netflix is now.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Crazy.
So like
Yeah.
you look at how transcendent the iPhone, the iPad, the iWatch, the Apple Music, the streaming titles, Spotify, Pandora, all of these different sources that we can pull joy from. And so like I always look at these kind of people as just, damn, how did you get that smart? You're a genius. Kanye's a genius. That fool spent $7.5 million on a Super Bowl ad and sold $25 million of merchandise, or well, how many ever much money it was he sold in merchandise. That's
Yeah.
a
Because he used.
$7 bet.
Yeah. He used that production budget, because a lot of people probably spent loads of money on the commercial, but he just recorded it with his phone. His commercial was on his iPhone with no budget, but he paid that production budget and sold way more. Just smart.
Yeah.
He's a marketing genius. I will give him that. Yes, he is. But he knows his influence and he knows his power.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he a genius. No, I don't think he is. But that's a whole other topic.
I think I love that Jay-Z quote more than anything. Any other quote in the world other than the ego is not the amigo one, is there is genius in everyone. And when you kind of operate that way in conversation with others, and you can really tap into someone in that capacity, I think you're going to find a level of enlightenment with more of your conversations. So that's a challenge for the week or a challenge for the month.
Absolutely.
It's to learn to see greatness in who you're speaking to or who you're working with, as opposed to the negative part. Oh, I can't stand Janice because she's always drinking coffee and eating her food at 9 o'clock, at your cubicle, whatever.
Macking, crunching in my ear.
Yeah, but if you can just see what her greatness is, like she might be really great at organizing the staff calendar, and start recognizing her for her greatness, and you're going to have different levels of conversations now with that particular person because you're seeing good in them, not the bad in them.
Whew, that is such a great thing to work on, because we do a lot of times look for the worst in people. But if we did do what you're saying, I think that would change a lot of. I'm gonna work on that this week. Yeah. Starting after this show. Yeah. I have a meeting.
I think that we could call them Alecisms, whatever you want to call it, but like I want to be able to throw that out there because I think that that's also something that sometimes is lost in the sauce, especially in a competitive environment. I think a lot of people can have different takeaways of who you are competitively, and that's not necessarily, like I said, who you are. So that's why I'm excited about this, is because I think people are going to get a chance to see a different side of me.
I know, I'm excited too.
Yeah. So like, I'm really not trying to be self-loathing on it or anything like
no,
that.
No, like, that's fine.
But I just think like it's a chance for me to really get some of the things that only my closest friends get, that they get that Alec. And again, it's hard because now I'm being vulnerable to opinions and opinions that really in my mindset don't matter. And I don't think I operate off that anyway, so I'm good. Like I always felt like if I was to ever have made it really big, like I don't necessarily
think you made it.
Well, yeah, but I don't think the opinions of other would skew how I dress or how I talk or how I would pretty much beat to my own drum. And I'm glad that I have friends that are not yes people that tell me the same thing. They're like, yeah, I don't know how you do it. I'm like, I just do it. And I think it's a lot of upbringing. Like, that's a whole nother thing. Right. It's just upbringing, listen to what matters and not, what doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, feel free to shine here because
I appreciate
you. You don't have to worry about any of that judgment or just this is going to be great. This is a safe space, as they say.
Yeah. We got a lot to talk about this season.
I know. Like I don't want to end you guys because I was like, there's so many things we could still talk about, but we're trying to keep these episodes concise. So you guys. Thank you for joining us on our first episode together. And yeah, get ready for our next episode. Talk to you soon.
All right.